What's up, everybody? This is the Uncanny Omar from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions, and today I get to talk to Steve Horton to talk a little bit about his history with comics and the new project he is working on. How's it going, Mr. Horton?
Doing great, doing great. Great to be here.
I'm glad that you decided to join us today, so thank you for that.
hmm
And I always like to ask because I'm always curious myself, like how people get started in writing comics, like where it began, what you did before, and what was your segue to saying, "Hey, you know what? I want to write comic books. I can do this."
Well, I studied writing in school. I went to Purdue as a writing major, and I was going to be a journalist, started at newspapers, and then right before I graduated, way back in 2001, I was an intern at Comics Buyer's Guide, which was a comics-based newspaper that was very popular, rivaled Wizard magazine at the time.
Hmm.
And that got me really interested in the craft of writing comics. Got to interview all the comic pros of the time and write articles about them. And jumped in with both feet with web comics. Got published by Image very early on. But the first project that I was really proud of was in 2006. It was called Amala's Blade,
Okay.
and that was with Dark Horse. And that one with Michael Dialinas, who's gone on to great success since then. And I did a series called Satellite Falling for IDW with Stephen Thompson, and then a graphic novel with the All Reds about David Bowie, which sold a bunch of copies, won a bunch of awards, and now I'm here doing my own thing. Decided to bypass the publishers and go it alone with crowdfunding with Zoop, and so far it's going really well.
Oh, I'm happy to hear that. So I've read Amala's Blade and I've read Satellite Falling. And Satellite Falling, I put it into one of my hidden gems. Like every month, I pick five books that has been previously published that not a lot of people are talking about. But that was one that made it into my hidden gems. I think last September or August. I think so. That one's fresh on the mind. And Bowie, how does a project like that even start? Like, are you a fan of David Bowie and you're like, I want to write a comic book about David Bowie? Not, it's been done before, but what? How did that get started?
Well, I've been a fan of his my whole life, and
Okay.
a few years back, let's see, around 2020, no, further back, around 2017, it was a year after Bowie's death in 2016, and around 2017, I thought they were doing this gallery in the UK at a UK comic shop on Orbital
Mhm.
Comics. All these comic book artists were reinterpreting David Bowie's album covers in their own style on the anniversary of his death, and I thought, wouldn't it be great if someone did a whole graphic novel like this? No one had even thought about doing that before. So I found an agent, I found a publisher. I contacted Mike Allred, cold emailed him. He's the world's biggest David Bowie fan, and he happened to be just finishing up Silver Surfer and just wrapping that up, and happened to be in between projects. And he was really excited about the prospect of doing a graphic novel, oversized hardcover about David Bowie. And it took about 3 years to produce, uh, pretty much full time for the All Reds. They did a couple other projects during that time, but pretty much dedicated only to Bowie for 3 years. It took a lot less time to write it, of course. And
Yeah, awesome. Wait.
in 2020, January 2020 was when it came out. We had this big European tour and all this stuff planned. And then March hit and all that went out the window. But thankfully, it still sold very well. A lot of people stuck at home, quarantine, wanted a book to read, and they picked that one, and I was very happy about that. When the next year's Eisners came around in 2021, they there was still a virtual convention at the time,
Mhm.
and the awards were virtual, and we won a bunch of awards. We won we were nominated 3 Eisners, and we won two for art and coloring. And it was really cool to hear Phil Lamar of all people, read out our book on the air. So that was really neat.
Dude, that is so awesome.
Hmm.
And Mike and Laura are my wife and I did an overview of their Silver Surfer book, which was just got recently reprinted. And she was like, "What else can I read?" I'm like, "Well, if you want to go old school, read a little bit of Madman. He did a lot of that, and then Ecstatics. But everybody loves Bowie." And she was like, "You did a David Bowie book?" And I was like, "Yes. As a matter of fact, I'm interviewing the guy that wrote it." And she was really excited. She couldn't be here to pop her head in, but that seems to be a very popular book. Like whether people even listen to David Bowie or not, like people are like going by this comic book. It's so good.
Yeah, we had several celebrities pick it up and take pictures of themselves with it and post it on Twitter. So that was really neat to see.
That's awesome.
It was really cool. And I want to do another music-based book about another musician.
Mhm.
It's taking a while to figure out exactly who that's going to be. So I'm talking to managers for just about everyone, and I think I'm really close to settling on someone. And Bowie was unofficial, but this one is going to be like the official graphic novel of this musician. So we'll see what
Oh,
happens.
that's really interesting. Now, would you try to reunite with Mike and Laura?
I want to, but they are incredibly busy at the moment. I'd have to make them an offer they can't refuse. So we'll see.
There has to be another musician that they both take an interest in.
Hmm.
Uh, so, tell us a little bit about this current project. That what made you decide to go? Okay, I'm going to try to fund this on my own, and then what the differences are like in doing something like Bowie and Satellite Falling to what you're doing with this current book that you're working on, the uh, 9 Lives.
Well, Nine Lives, I pitched about 8 or 9 years ago to all the publishers, working with Chris Peterson. We put a pitch package together, and a lot of them wrote back and said, this is great. We really like it, but we don't have room for it in our schedule. Uh, Most publishers only take on a couple of really original projects a year, and they only they only take on a couple projects, and so a lot of really good pitches unfortunately get turned down, fall by the wayside. So that one went in a drawer for many years, and when I decided to try crowdfunding with Zoop, because unlike Kickstarter, Zoop has fulfillment and controls all that stuff that I know I'd be really bad at, like sending the books out. So I thought, why don't I revive this project, contact Chris Peterson and see if he's still interested? And he said, yeah, but my style has completely changed in the last 9 years. And I said, that's fine. It's great. It's even better now. So he's even a better artist. He's redrawing it. It's going really well. And we're close to funded. So we're very excited to get across the finish line and get this book in the hands of people.
So, can you tell us a little bit about the subject of the book or what it's going to be like when you envision it? Like, is it going to be one story, or can you see it continuing?
Well, we're starting with the one shot. We'd like to do 9 issues total. And the first issue, it's a self-contained story about Cleo, who is a 1920s nightclub singer uh, who has a magic power to turn water into alcohol. And she discovers that's just the beginning of her powers.
Mhm.
It's no coincidence that each version of her reincarnated throughout history has a magic ability that is associated with what she does and what kind of occupation she has. Uh, and she discovers quickly, like all of her incarnations throughout history, that there is someone stalking her and tried to kill her. Uh, and it happens to be the same person throughout history, a man named Anthony, who is also being reincarnated 9 times and is
Mhm.
trying to kill all 9 variations of her at the same time. And in this case, he is a prototypical 1920s gangster who is trying to Tommy gun her, and so she has to use her all of her wits to try to stay alive throughout the story.
And how is it that you two got together? I'm going to show off some of these pages because I love the look of this book. It has a very well. I'll show them and then I'll talk about what it reminds me of. But yeah, how did you two get together, like to work on this particular book?
I think I probably saw his work on social media and some of his stuff like Grindhouse with Dark Horse, with Alex DeCampi,
Mhm.
and some other places, some of the other published work that he's done. And if I remember correctly, I just sent him an email and said, "I really like your work. Would you like to work on a book together?" And he said, "Sure." And there are a whole bunch of pages being produced already. We're going to be finished with the book soon, and we'll be able to get it out to people pretty quickly after the campaign is over.
Now, that's awesome. Let me share one of the pages here. Let me see if that other file was way too big, so I had to shrink it down.
There it
Doesn't do it
is.
justice, but there we go. Oh my gosh, when I saw this, I immediately thought of Darwin Cook's art style
Uh-huh.
that he used for Parker.
He's been compared to Darwin Cook as far as the kind of the two-tone coloring and the design of his characters. Uh, these pages have actually been redrawn since this, but his new
Oh,
style
really?
is
Okay.
even cooler than this. It's even better if you can believe that. Uh, and we chose this kind of minimalist color approach because we felt like it fit the tone of the story really well.
So when you say that these pages had previously been released, then that was 9 years ago, right?
Hmm.
Only myself. There we go. Um, so 9 years ago, he drew these with the intent of having this. And is that how it usually works? Would you say, like, hey, let's draw an issue and we'll see if we can get it published by Image, Dark Horse. You shop it around, right?
Yeah, I usually put together a pitch package between 3 and 10 pages of and a cover. I
Mhm.
don't know why we didn't do the cover, but you do it as close to finished as you can with the lettering and coloring all in place, and you come up with a outline, a proposal, character designs, character descriptions, things like that. Just try to be as thorough as you can with for a publisher, following their submission guidelines as closely as you can. And talk to people at IDW, Dark Horse, Image,
Mhm.
Vault. Uh, there's a couple other really good. Oh, Mad Cave's a really good one now.
Yeah.
They're an excellent place to get published at. And there's a few other smaller press places like Source Point is really good. Uh, there's a lot of venues out there, and if you want to go it alone like I'm doing, uh, crowdfunding is amazing. Kickstarter is full of comics, and Zoop has about a dozen projects going at a time as well. And they're they're a really up and coming venue for comics also. And the nice thing about crowdfunding is that you don't have to wait on a publisher to say yes or no. If you believe in the project, you just publish it yourself and get it out to people.
I guess the biggest hurdle would be to get the word out, right?
Mhm.
Like let people know that you're working on this. Um, so, but, uh, I guess my question is, as the creators of the of this title, for example, how do you and the artist get the word out? Like, where do you start doing that?
It helps to have a decent social media following. I picked a variant cover artist named Lee Tran, who I knew had a huge Instagram and Twitter presence. It's one of the reasons I chose him, because thinking marketing wise, not only is he a great artist, but when he posts on there, he gets thousands of likes and replies. So if I hire Lee to do the variant cover, then I have this additional avenue to fans that wouldn't necessarily be aware of me or Chris. So having a really good variant artist with a good following is important. I have a newsletter that I post on every couple weeks, uh, and just talking to people on podcasts like this, and in text interviews on places like the Beat. I think we have a Beat interview going up this week,
Mhm.
and other places. And we had a Newsarama. No, uh, we had an interview on Reed Pop's website just the other week as well, and
Oh, okay. Yeah.
just getting the word out at different places like that. I think in the media, and one thing I did because Neil Gaiman wrote the intro to our Bowie book, I
Mhm.
sent him a tweet the other day. Said, "Hey, thanks again for writing that intro for us, or that forward for us a few years back. Could you retweet this?" And he said, "Sure," and that helped a lot.
That's awesome. It really does help to make connections, and I've interviewed so many creators that they've talked about. You never want to burn bridges because you never know who you're going to be reaching out to, for a little support or even a little push. So I think it's wonderful that, and it all started with you. I assume, I just assume that whenever you were interviewing people, comic creators, that you kept some contacts, right? With some of these people.
Oh yeah, I talked to Mark Wade for the first time about 20 years ago, and he still remembers me. So people
That's
like that.
awesome.
Yeah, it's important to keep those connections open. Jimmy Palmiotti is another one that has been a great supporter over the
Mhm.
years. Always gives a quote for the back of the book, which is really, really appreciated. I need to thank him in person sometime. Uh, but yeah, things like that, getting pros to endorse your work, I think when you're coming up, and even when you're a success, I think is really helpful for because if someone who is really big in the industry says they like your work, that word of mouth is better than anything.
But with a name like Bowie, it kind of you had Bowie and Mike Allred and Laura Allred, right? So that's a little different than doing something like this. Doing something like this, I think it's wonderful that you're doing your creator-owned stuff. And I always wondered, what people do to try to get their work out there. Now,
Mhm.
being that I love collected editions, and so do most of my viewers, is this one of the things that you would like to see? Would you like to see Nine Lives collected in a nice hardcover collection, all 9 issues?
Yeah, Zoop does do hardcovers. They're just doing one now, yeah, for another project.
Mhm.
And so once we have enough crowdfunded issues put together, would definitely like to make a nice hardcover. I prefer the hardcover format over softcover and single issue. I have a bookshelf full of hardcovers, just like you would do behind you. It's my preferred format. So getting that into a nice hardcover format is definitely the
Yes.
goal.
I always wonder, like, who thinks ahead. Like, okay, it's got to be 9 issues once it's all collected, when trade paperback and hardcover. Because it is a lot different to try to print your own hardcover too than it is to try to get a company to do it, like Image or Dark Horse.
hmm What we may end up doing is once we have the whole thing completed and put together, we may approach a traditional publisher again and say, "Hey, this was a crowdfunding success. We have 9 issues completed. It's all done. You don't have to pay us again because we've already paid ourselves
Mhm.
to the fans. Would you maybe want to print this?" And a lot of times, I know Dark Horse has printed a bunch of Comixology web comics
They have.
and other places like that. So odds are one of them would probably say yes.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think that's what I've seen out there too. Dark Horse, I think Image has done it. Booms has done it in the past, where yeah, they see a crowd source book that's been funded, fully funded, and it's been selling, and then they print it with their logo on it. So I think it
Yeah.
does help. Like, who was it? I cannot remember. I was talking to somebody that was telling me that they did their own book, they printed it, and then they had Image printed, and it just kind of blew up at Image because that's just the way these things are,
hmm
and that's how they go.
Yeah, a lot of these publishers really appreciate completed projects because if they greenlight something that only has 5 pages done, there have been some times where the creator has been unable to finish the book and it never comes out. But a completed projects are already done. You just have to send them the files and they run with it.
Right. That's a good pitch. Hey, this is done. All you need to do is just hit print and
Uh,
let it go. Let it fly. Um, what kind of advice do you give people, like when they're trying to write their own comics? Because writing is a lot different than drawing a comic. What advice as a writer do you give people that are trying to make their own comic, whether self-published or working for the big two, or even Image or DC, or I'm sorry, Dark Horse or IDW?
well, let me go, Google something real quick.
Sure.
I have a I have a blog if I can find the URL.
Awesome. You came
There it is.
prepared.
It's at Steve-Horton uh, .ghost.io. Check it out. Go there, and but I'll reiterate some of the stuff that's in there while we're waiting.
You said
And
it's at Steve Horton.
Steve-Horton
Uh-huh.
.ghost.io, and It might be taken down, but anyway, I'll fix it right after the call. So what's going on with someone up and coming who wants to be a comic book writer? Best thing to do is to Google comic book scripts and study them, especially if you can look at the finished issue alongside the script. You can see what the comic book script format looks like. Google Fred Van Lente's website has some great examples of comic book script templates and example comic book scripts. So you take a look at those, see they're a little bit like screenplays, but not exactly, because in a comic book you can only have one action going on in a panel at a time, for example, compared to a screenplay, which can have more than one thing happening at a time. So you just study those, find yourself a really good artist friend to work with, put something together, put it online somewhere like Webtoon, and get it out to the public and kind of build your audience that way. And just it's never really been an easier time to make comics. Of course, if your goal is to write Spider-Man, it's probably never been more difficult to do that in history.
It's never been more difficult. Wow, what makes you say that?
It's very, very hard to break into Marvel and DC right now, because they have their writers and artists, and new creators don't break in too often, especially on the writing front. You have to really be established and really prove yourself elsewhere first. And the best way to do that is through independent comics. Of course, I think indie comics are a fine goal in and of themselves, rather than having Marvel or DC as a goal, which could be unrealistic. But I think doing your own thing as its own goal is probably best. So, get your stuff online, make some web comics, and then, put some print packages together if you want to work with Image or somewhere like that, and just follow their instructions. And the trick there is that you don't have to be better than the worst book they do. You have to be as good as the best book they do. So you have to be amazing to make independent comics with some of these publishers. And even if you don't think you are, do a crowdfunded book or two, get your word out, get your name out there, build your following, and go from there.
You mentioned Fred Van Lente. Him and Greg Pak worked really close. And Greg Pak actually had a lot of scripts out there too, downloading. Thought that's really interesting that Fred Van Lente does too.
Yeah, Gail Simone puts the scripts online. A lot of these writers will publish their scripts, so you can kind of see how. Even I think there's even some Grant Morrison scripts out there, so you can kind of see how these creators do it, how they put together a scene in a panel for an artist, even if they don't know what artist they're going to work with, and how they set the stage and populate it, and how they do dialogue, and what natural dialogue sounds like, and just look at that. Take a look at how that translated into a comic, and just try and duplicate it for yourself.
That's some great advice, man. And what is it? You mentioned the big two. It's hard to break it in there. What would Steve Horton like to write? What comic book from the big two, if you had a choice?
Well, it's been a few years now. Back in the 2000s, I did a short story about Bizarro for an anthology with Dan McDade, and that was a lot of fun. It was very funny, and it was holiday themed and very, very silly. And so doing something like that for DC or Marvel again with something that has a lot of humor with a character like that, I think would be a lot of fun. So I definitely would be attracted to the humor side of the big two if I ever got the chance to do that again.
Now, when working with different artists, like one of my favorite things to ask is, okay, so you're working with Chris Peterson right now. You work with Mike Allred and Laura Allred. Is there a difference in the way that you write your script per se? Do you write for your artist, or do you write the same way with everybody across the board?
Well, most artists these days prefer a full detailed script with all of the panel breakdowns and all the dialogue. It's considered full script. Mike and Laura Allred worked with they preferred more of a plot first approach. Put in summarize the page, put in the dialogue, but no need to go panel by panel, because Mike prefers to figure that out himself. So it's all about asking the artist, what kind of format do you prefer? Really detailed? Do you want me to just summarize in a couple paragraphs and put the dialogue in and have you figure out the panel stuff? I can write either way. So it all depends on what the artist is comfortable with.
So with them, you have to do it the Marvel way, huh?
It's more Marvel style with Mike. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think I always appreciate it. I like that. I like that you can go to the extreme of Alan Moore, right? And then you can have something that is very pretty open, trusting
Mhm.
the artist, if you will, sometimes. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I heard with Alan Moore's scripts, I love his work, but artists would often have to go through and highlight the actual stuff they needed to draw in there, which I thought was funny.
I've heard I've heard if you've ever wanted to break it as a comic book artist, you do not want to look at an Alan Moore script because it will wreck you. How much control he has over every panel, which I think is great, right? I mean, obviously the guy's a wonderful storyteller, but to have that much control, oh my gosh, I don't know how. Well, never mind. Some of these artists did it.
For me, I think it's just important to I'm trying not to be too verbose, just to describe the scene, make sure all the important bits are there. Uh, if there's a gun being fired on page 5, make sure you describe it on page 1, for example. Make sure you have the people in the right speaking order for the panel so that the lettering doesn't have to cross awkwardly, things like that.
Now, with 9 Lives, are you going to have a little sticker on there that says from Eisner Award winner Steve Horton? Is that how it's done?
We could put a sticker on the front that says that. I think it's on the back page somewhere. But technically, I might have to fix this. I didn't win the Eisners. I have to give all the credit to Mike and Laura. They won for art and coloring. Now,
Oh,
now, now the book we worked on did win the
mhm.
Eisner, so I have an Eisner by association, but I didn't get a trophy myself.
You
But
were part. You were a big part of that book. If not for you,
mhm.
well, of course, if not for David Bowie. But you know what I'm saying. If not for you, then that book would not have happened in the way that it happened, and therefore winning an Eisner.
Yeah, I do get to say I'm a New York Times bestseller though, so they can't take that away
Yeah.
from me. So
There
that's
you
okay.
go. There you go. Um. Okay. Any last words after this? Like where people can find your work after you're done with 9 Lives?
Yes, you can find Bowie in any Barnes and Noble bookstore, or your local comic shop, or on Amazon. It's still being printed in zillionth printing. You can find it just about any language you can think of if you live internationally. And 9 Lives you can find on zoop.gg. Uh, and we're going to put that link into the stream so you can find and help get us over the finish line. We're just a few $100 away from being fully funded and getting books out to people.
That's great. I wish you luck, and I want to thank you for joining us today and talking a little bit about your history with comics and how you got into the industry and what it's like to work and what it's like to try to fund your own book too. So we wish you luck. You got 2 days left. I left a link in the description of the video for anybody that's watching this later. For anybody that's watching now, go and click here and see how you can support to get this book funded. And that is 9 Lives. It's over on Zoop. That's by Steve Horton, New York Times best-selling Steve Horton, and Chris Peterson. And there's different tiers, like the main cover, the PDF file, the variant covers, or get everything. There's also a retailer bundle too, if you are a retailer and wanting to carry the book.
Yeah, and one thing we just added yesterday is which someone has already taken advantage of. If you want Chris Peterson to draw the cover or design a character for your next indie comic, you can add that on at the end, and he will do that for you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see that. Nice. So yeah, if you're trying to get your own book made and you need a cover artist, there you go. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Steve. Thank you all so much for watching. Smash that like button on the way out. And again, good journey. Good luck to you, Steve. Hope to see more of you and more of your name out there on books. And I want to hear more about that musician that you hinted at making a book about sometime.
Very soon, we'll get to announce that. But yeah, it was
Awesome.
great. It was great to be here.
Thank you. Everyone stay healthy and safe. Much love.